Morning, everyone, and welcome to the August edition of the Heart of Cary Alliance membership meeting. Very excited to introduce our guest this morning. But before I do, I'd like to first of all thank my co-host Neil Sugarman for being here with me to help moderate. I want to let you know, if you're not already aware of how the Zoom Q&A works, there's a section at the bottom for you to either make a note and chat for discussion, or you can ask a question and have it addressed during today's session. Before I introduce our special guest this morning, I'm going to quickly reflect on last month's meeting and ask that you put some time aside on your schedule for August 27th. Last month, with the help of former Cary Police Chief Tony Godwin and consultant True Pettigrew, sorry about that. We began the discussion with our own Dr. Rose Cornelius from Dorcas Ministries as we began this conversation related to the many social injustices that have been occurring across our country for centuries. And there's been a tremendous swelling of our membership to join in as we continue to explore the fascinating topic of unconscious bias, where it comes from, and what we can do about it as downtown Cary leaders, business owners, and citizens. In our hyper-connected world, as we shift to work differently due to COVID-19, it's more important than ever to understand how our minds work, the shortcuts it takes to protect us, and how that may affect us. In some cases, we're operating in what the facilitator of our upcoming event on August 27th, Dawn Potter Sander, refers to as cognitive overload, which can lead to compromised decision-making. Further, with recent events leading to an increased awareness of racial injustice, it's important to understand how our unconscious biases may lead to unintended inequitable behaviors or statements. The reality is we all have biases, and they don't make us bad, but we're human, and they sometimes unknowingly affect the way we think, communicate, and act. In fact, we need bias to survive. The more we understand about how our brains are wired, the more aware we can be of how we're showing up as leaders and how we impact those around us. Dawn is a certified coach with a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in adult education from NC State. And she has planned a very safe environment for us to openly discuss this topic without judgment, blame, or shame. The goals of the session are to increase awareness, confront our own biases, to better serve our organizations, teams, and customers, and to leave with at least one insight or action that you can take to mitigate your bias. She promises this to be an inspiring and interactive session, so we hope you'll join us for one of the 2 sessions on August 27th. Stay tuned for the invitation from the Heart of Cary, with 2 sessions offered to accommodate your varied schedules. And next month, September 3rd, our guest is Joe Milazzo, the Executive Director of the Regional Transportation Alliance, with a wonderful update on the impacts on our transportation and traffic system. Sean, I really appreciate you being here. Most of those on today's call, and even those who are watching this recording, have been introduced to you by the way of your bio or have met you personally, and some of you work directly day to day with Sean. So I'm going to dispense with any further introductions and simply thank you for being here with us this morning and jump right into our conversation. But before I do, I want to help everyone keep our questions for you and your responses in their proper perspective. As a town manager, you have a lot of responsibilities. And if you want to weave an explanation of your day-to-day roles in the conversation, I welcome you to do that. But we have far more questions this morning than time, so I'm going to set the stage for the spirit that these questions have been asked and welcome you to respond in whatever way you think is appropriate. So I'm going to start by sharing a survey of healthcare experts. 1% expect the COVID vaccine to be available by the end of this year, 25% during the next 12 months, and 41% by the end of 2021. Financial experts in the markets are decidedly more optimistic, 12%, 44%, and 33% respectively. Even if we take the market's more optimistic outlook, that means potentially devastating implications to the many small businesses in our community. As one of the more influential leaders in our community, you have a staff, including our police force, our fire department, planning, engineering, development services, finance, public works, utilities, parks and recs, permits and inspections, transportation and facilities, the clerk's office, not to mention your own individual support team. And I don't think anyone on this call today would argue that you have one of the most honest, loyal, dedicated, efficient, and more productive staffs in the nation, having accumulated countless awards and the accolades that continue to drive new residents and businesses to our community. So I wanted to start off our meeting thanking you for your leadership and all that. It all goes downhill from here. I'm just kidding. But all seriousness aside, I brought up the quality of your team for a reason. It's clearly not by accident that you've developed such an amazing team. And from what I've gathered over my last nearly 30 years living here is that we as a community value right over wrong in every way. So I think we could argue that the decisions that you're faced with day to day that involve choices between right and wrong are easy. I mean, they're really your nature. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. Yes.
So with that in mind, you're constantly faced with helping others make the more difficult choices, the choices between one or more right decisions, and we call those dilemmas. And I can't imagine a time where you and your team and our council have been faced with a more difficult challenge of balancing the needs of our community with the needs of individuals and balancing our entire community's short-term needs with our long-term well-being. So all that said, where do you feel we lean as a community to help balance these conflicting needs? And maybe worded another way, more pointedly, could there be a point at which we consider putting the financial and mental health risks of the many in front of the healthcare risks of the fewer?
Well, Scott, let me begin by thanking you and the Heart of Cary for inviting me here today. This is actually my first presentation of the year, and certainly wouldn't have expected it to be in this fashion just a couple months ago, but very much appreciated and very impressed with how it's been organized and the continued dedication to keeping the organization moving forward in spite of the difficulties presented in 2020. Well, to answer your question specifically, Scott, I really appreciate the fact that you're making a distinction between right versus wrong, something that we don't deal with very often, and more two different rights. And balancing those values is something that the council and the staff struggle with regularly, and try to avoid certainty creeping in or deciding that this is the way to do things, or that the town of Cary does this, but we don't do that. Certainly there are some historical precedents for what the town of Cary does and what it doesn't do. For instance, the town of Cary has been historically a more straightforward service provision entity, police, fire, nuts and bolts things, versus some of our neighbors who have obviously longer histories, more urban, if you will, Raleigh, Durham, that are more heavily engaged in, not-for-profit funding, a lot of other issues that come along with an aging community. And Cary is making that transition as we age. And that has been the primary focus of my job after the council hired me to implement Imagine Cary just 4 years ago yesterday. And what Imagine Cary, the community plan, talks about is navigating us through that transition while retaining that value that you were speaking of excellence. Cary has a history of wanting to be excellent in all things. And there certainly hasn't been any playbook to what excellence looks like during COVID-19. The stories that are primarily received by the mayor and the council and then shared with the staff of the struggles that small businesses are having. And certainly through Mayor Pro Tem Don France, who's a small business owner, he's been able to very much personalize that, not only for me, but for the rest of the staff and his colleagues on the council, And I don't think that there's anything that we worry about more is what is our role in being able to help small businesses, which has not been a significant focus relative to other things in Cary's history, okay? Because there really wasn't a role for that, meaning the town of Cary gets involved in those things it needs to get involved in, and those things it doesn't need to do are either left to the private sector or to other levels of government like the county and federal. And while certainly at this point, those programs are still primarily the domain of the federal and state governments, there are certainly ways that the town of Cary can and should and will continue to help, going forward, balancing not only the needs of the greatest good for the greatest good for the greatest number for the community, but individual businesses. Councilmember Lori Bush has been a strong advocate for marketing and communication, helping get the word out via social media, which she is seemingly wired into all the time. It's like having a live news source with me at all times with Councilmember Bush. It's pretty amazing. And then also through our assistance through our utility system. So we've made it very public that during this time period, which is certainly has gone on longer than any of us, I think, would have expected. And given your opening comments, will continue to go on longer than any of us want. We would not shut off any business or homeowner for lack of paying their utility bills, their water and sewer bill. And that's something that we would avoid in the past. We would always work with people, but making it public that we will work with you as long as you stay and remain in communication with us, that we will continue to provide those services indefinitely. And the reason why that's important is under the law, a business cannot remain open if it doesn't have active utility accounts. It cannot be occupied. Any structure can't be occupied, resident or business, unless it has those utility accounts. And the people that are taking advantage of that continues to grow. So that's probably the best example I would have of something that had no historical precedent in the town of Cary, that the council felt was important to put into place during this time period. That helps not only businesses, but individuals, again, kind of meeting that maximum of the greatest good for the greatest number.
That's a great response, and I appreciate that. And I hope that we'll continue to find ways as a town to lead our people through these challenges. So another significant dilemma we're faced with is related to housing. After years of being known as a bedroom community, the RTP, we've grown into an employment center with our older communities, particularly those within walking distance of the new park, seeing teardowns of single family homes for sometimes 2 or even 3 new single family homes. And we are clearly trying to balance traffic concerns related to greater density with affordable housing for our town's most important citizens, our employees, our police, our fire people, and our teachers. Is there something that we can do as a community, as an organization, to take some action perhaps to demonstrate our support for teachers, first responders who would like to live in downtown Cary? And have we considered maybe providing some form of incentives to make downtown living more affordable for those individuals who serve our community in so many ways?
Well, the answer to that is yes. And the affordable housing, I would put in local government, affordable housing and stormwater are the 2 most difficult multi-dimensional adaptive challenges that we deal with. And every community struggles with those. I think we really are leading the way in some of the stormwater efforts that we've implemented in the last couple of years. And the area of affordable housing is an area that we're really starting to get into in a much bigger way. Again, I had a lot of great leadership from the entire council, but also in particular Councilmember Bush, working with the county to try to develop additional options. But and actually there's one project that we're hoping and it's looking very promising for downtown Cary that unfortunately, since it deals with land acquisition, I'm not at liberty to discuss today. And as anyone who knows me, I'm not known for not talking about things, but sometimes it becomes critical, which I think will be very well received by the heart of Cary and the rest of the downtown and the community at large that we're continuing to work on in spite of COVID. But one thing I certainly want to make clear is the Triangle is one of the most desirable locations in the country to relocate to. And there is a lot of data and information that would indicate that in the mid to longer term, COVID is only enhancing our standing as a place to relocate to. And the example that I would use is if you live now in New York, you live in Chicago, you live in LA, you live in Atlanta, those are big urban areas, much bigger than obviously than the Triangle. And that concentration of people has been certainly a difficult challenge during COVID. And many of them are going to look to relocate. There's already data that is demonstrating that, but they're likely not going to move to Iowa. You don't go from New York or Chicago to Iowa. You go to a smaller urban region, such as even a Denver or a Triangle, where you can kind of get a balance of the two worlds. And I would highly anticipate, not that we're happy about that or want to have success at the expense of anyone else, but we have to be prepared for that. And maybe the best indicator of that so far is this year, property values, both commercial and residential, continue to increase. Mm-hmm. And so relative to other markets, the Triangle is still very affordable on a relative basis because property values in New York and San Francisco and LA have gotten to the point of an extreme crisis. And so we compare favorably. Boston, you can throw them all into that. For those that have been here for any amount of time, you've seen significant increases in the property values here that in all likelihood will continue to increase. So this challenge will continue to go up. And unfortunately, I'm not here, I don't have any answers for that, other than we have to continue to embrace density, which certainly the council has and the Imagine Cary Community Plan calls for. And then finding creative ways to make sure that we're developing in a way where services that you don't have to get in a car to go do everything. So while the cost of housing may continue to increase, maybe transportation costs continue to move down. And there's certainly a lot of investment in transportation is going forward in other types of services. But it's it's a challenge. And I often say every part of the town of Cary, everything that we do every day contributes to housing values going up. So if we stopped doing proactive preventative policing, if we stopped responding to fires, if we stopped fixing streets, obviously the community would get a lot more affordable. And so we're actually perfectly aligned to do the opposite. So how do you show up to work in the entire machine, the 1,200 employees at the town of Cary are engaged in enhancing the investment for the benefit of our existing residents? How do you balance that with the need to continue to try to focus this area where we can still make the Cary dream attainable to a large number of people as it has been in the past?
That's a great response. And my hope is that members of our organization and your staff can better address that question now when people ask, why in my backyard? And the reality of it is, it's everybody's backyard. We have to work together to make this a better place for everyone. If you just make it about you, what have you really accomplished? So speaking to the increasing density, one of the concerns that I hear are pedestrian safety concerns about crossing over Dry Street, Harrison Avenue, crossing over from 100 Park West to the 200 block because of the way the road jinks over. Are there things that we're monitoring? Are we tracking these things?
Yes, Scott, I'm glad that you asked that. We get asked this question a lot. So we're in that inflection period where the street and pedestrian network for the downtown has worked and functioned very well for quite some time. But as you'd mentioned, with all of the density that's coming in now, and most of it is yet to occur, mm-hmm. we have to simultaneously change and adapt that transportation network. So, that kind of jog that is there now, well, that won't be there in the future. There are designs underway to make that adjustment. And also there are a lot of opportunities in downtown Cary, and I won't try to name them all, where we can add connecting streets and create more of a grid network. And so that allows grids are the most efficient way to move people and vehicles. And so we'll be adding a lot of that. And also, just with that density over time comes the more people and activity you have downtown, the more difficult it is to drive fast, very, very simply. So the additional activity will slow people down. So what we're trying to do is create that bridge while you have still people used to motoring in a way that they have before, and also being kind of respectful to the pedestrians and the additional people that continue to come downtown. And so there are a lot of plans underway, though most of them will be available in greater detail, probably early next year, because we're making those plans now and developing them in conjunction and participation with the developers that seek to develop downtown. Because one thing I want to remind everybody of, if a developer develops in a certain area and they impact traffic there, they have to fund those improvements to said transportation network. We're also planning for additional smaller, but yet still very helpful parking decks that will be located throughout the downtown area in order to facilitate that transition. Because I tell you, parking is one of those issues before COVID. You know, my biggest problem in January and February was worrying about parking downtown. It's not my biggest challenge right now for obvious reasons, but it remains a challenge, and the one that we're currently actively working on. And you know, one of the silver linings of COVID is allowing us to catch up on some of those things. I also like to say is I'm really sick and tired of talking about silver linings, because when you're talking about silver linings, that means you've got a big problem. So, but we want to stay positive.
That's a good point. You know, it really has, you know, allowed a lot of us to focus more on planning than, you know, immediate responses and reactions to circumstances. So as it relates to planning, there were, I know, a couple of projects that are important to a lot of people in the community. One is the Jordan project at the corner of Harrison and Chatham. And the other, of course, is the wrap around the library. And then, of course, Fenton, as it relates to potential competition for downtown small businesses. Can you speak to whether or not COVID has impacted the progress that they're making in each of those projects?
Yeah, I'll start with the last one first. Fenton, there is, and if anybody emails me, we can certainly send them an aerial. We've got great aerial pictures that show top down just the amount of mass grading in the building of stormwater detention facilities, retaining walls that's actively underway. So the major investments in that project have continued without pause during COVID. And again, I think what that does, obviously, retail and commercial industries have suffered during COVID, but on a comparative basis, Cary and the Triangle are such a ideal place to be. There's still an underserved market for that. So the money just is flowing to the most ideal places. And so that's, I think, reflected in Fenton. When it comes, as far as competition for the downtown, I mean, they're really seeking to complement the downtown, that and also the Cary Town Center redevelopment project. Mm-hmm. They're seeking to complement each other, and both are seeking to complement the downtown. And they both see the downtown as an asset. So they will be characterized more by national retailers, and also restaurants are going to be, and commercial office space are going to be two of the more primary features of those areas, as retail continues to be more and more specialized. So there certainly will be some overlap, but we don't expect there to be much as it continues to build out. The Jordan project, one that has been in the works, I think, when it was approved last year, for 10 years, which is not uncharacteristic for downtown development. It still has a couple of years to go, because there has to be the development of not just only the parking structure, but the stormwater that serves stormwater not only for the project, but for the town and for the church. And there's a lot of work that goes into that, approvals by the Army Corps of Engineers, and all that comes first in 2020, 2021. 2022 is when you'll start to see construction of certain elements there. And then the last one, the Academy Park Place project,
Mhm.
that there was a 2 to 3 month kind of pause on that, not for any reasons that they were encountering problems, but just that everybody kind of get their bearings during COVID, and they have certainly caught up during that time, continue to press forward, as well as the downtown park. That the downtown park project has gone on without delay and continues to push forward as well.
Hey, Sean, someone had a quick question about, is there a place where they can access plans for all these projects from the
Yeah,
town?
it depends on which one there are. And so some of the plans, like on the transportation thing, are not, they'd be maps and notes all over, some transportation planner that we have here's desk right now. And certainly for some other ones, there are certainly plans that can be accessed. So I would just encourage, people can certainly email me and ask, specifically what they're looking for. And I know they may not know what to ask, and so I can help them with that if they just give me their kind of general areas of interest. But we believe in informed citizenry, especially our partners downtown, only help us make better decisions. So be happy to share anything that we have, and then continue to share information as it develops over time.
That's wonderful. So are there any current plans for expansion of staff in any particular areas as we continue to grow?
No, Scott, actually we have been, when I arrived 4 years ago, we had a staffing plan that was tied into facility planning for the town hall in particular. And at that time, we were very close to being at full capacity for town hall, and also given those projections. Well, the model that I've embraced and the staff has embraced wholeheartedly, and you're right, they're amazing, is to have a fewer number of staff, invest in them in the highest possible way, and then you can provide the best level of service. So it's not the number of people that you have, it's the quality of those people. So when people ask me, well, how many police officers do you need? Well, tell me about the quality of the police officers, because I'd rather have one superstar than 3 mediocre ones. And certainly we've seen on the national stage the importance of having the most talented police officers is not lost on anybody, and we certainly have them in Cary. So we are adding 0 additional staff this year. And in the areas where we've been adding them it's a very rigorous process. It's not easy to get an additional staff person hired, nor should it be, because we have essentially 0 turnover. Our retention rate is over 99%, meaning if you come to town to Cary, you don't leave. And so what you're doing is you're making, with pensions, health insurance, and salary, you're making a multi-million-dollar decision. You're not making a $70,000 a year decision. And so obviously those are decisions that have to have a lot of scrutiny, and they do.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of positions, especially in planning, where roles they're multitasking in so many different ways.
Yes. I've tried to, as much as possible, along with the department directors, give everybody the experience that we have. And although it comes with additional stress, a job that is multidimensional, that isn't just I make widgets, I review plans. Well, not only do I review new plans, I do a little bit of historic preservation, I do a little bit of downtown development, and every once in a while I'll have a special assignment from the manager's office. Well, that creates a much richer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been my experience that even the best and most talented employees, if they only do one thing all day, after a period of years, they can do that in their sleep, and then they become not so good at it. Mm-hmm. Because it's become something that just can't motivate them in the highest and most possible way. So we've certainly looked to enrich people's jobs and really leverage that untapped potential that had rested in the staff. So doesn't make the jobs easier, but it does make them more rewarding or fulfilling.
No, that's
great. That's the goal.
Sure. So I have a question for you, and this is this is self-directed. As an organization, we are doing the best we can as we grow as an organization to balance the needs of the nonprofit community, the the businesses that are downtown and the residents. I mean, that's really what we believe our mission is to find a way to work together to become more synergistic. Is there anything that you can suggest to us as a local nonprofit that's has activists in each of those three areas that want the best for them, right? The businesses want their businesses to run well. The nonprofits want contributions and volunteers of their time, and our residents want this to be a better place to live. Anything
Sure,
that you
sure.
can suggest to us as an organization that we might do to become a better part of what we're trying to accomplish here as a community?
Yeah, actually, I can suggest a shortcut. Look to the federal government, look to Congress, and do the exact opposite. Yeah, and so meaning, in my view, my assessment only, this is not the town of Cary's assessment, Sean Stegall's assessment,
Yep.
is that there is so much focus on trying to advance your singular agenda, whether you're a Democrat or Republican,
Mhm.
that the concept of compromise and maybe putting your agenda second every once in a while and allowing other one to move forward, it was really the key to making sustainable long-term decisions. And so, as you mentioned, you have people that live downtown, you have the businesses, and you have the not-for-profits. And if each one of those special interest groups focuses only on maximizing their particular agenda, then everybody suffers. And in the long run, you might have short-term victories, but in the long run, you won't, because then the other side is only looking to kind of finish first next time.
Mhm.
And I think the Heart of Cary's done an excellent job at that. Certainly the spirit of working together is something that's been in Cary and in our downtown for decades. And as the activity continues to increase downtown, those pressures will only become more intense.
Mhm.
As density increases, as more and more and more people pour into downtown, and as there continues to be an understandable, for some people, a sense of loss of the memories of what downtown was.
Mhm.
And that's a very real thing.
Sure.
So when I talk to people that would like the downtown to stay the same as it is, that's about memories.
Mhm.
Mostly. And I understand that when it's a loss of memory. So I want my hometown to be exactly the way it was when I grew up. And it's not. And I think too often those engaged in the practice of local government, jump immediately to like, well, things are going to change and that's just the way it is because over time things progress, society changes. And while that may be true, really living first with that concept of what that struggle is like, and that we all have that in some fashion or form, and so I tried to play basketball not that long ago, and I used to be decent like 20 years ago, and it was a hard experience. And so we gotta plug this in. It's running low. And so I was experiencing a sense of loss of what it used to be like, and I'm not really going to play basketball again, probably ever again. But I think that's a really important concept for people as well.
Yeah, it's really a great point. You made me just ponder on, I get to see my daughter, who I haven't seen since pre-COVID. She turns 30 in February. And, if not for pictures and videos, where would all the memories be, right? So it's a great
Right.
point. We need to spend more time appreciating what it is we had and have, and recognize that there will be changes. Think about what you've learned from those experiences and understand that there's always another level of development in the relationship. That's a great point.
Yeah. And if Scott, if I could add to that, how that's manifested in our plans for downtown Cary, I think we would fail if we weren't able to retain what is the most precious elements of our downtown that have been in the past and that we want to propel into the future. And so the example I would give would be Academy Street. The nature and development of Academy will be very different than the rest of the downtown, and it will retain its the feel and the inviting nature that it has now will be preserved, because that is a crucial and key element for the town council, as manifested in comments and feedback they've received from our citizens, primarily those that are downtown. And so you try to balance those needs and have maybe the more intensive development, lots of times be more on the periphery of that. And so we're really trying to balance all of the values to the best of our ability. And we certainly need your help in doing that.
We're delighted to do everything we can to help with that. So, we talked about, as an organization now, we try to balance the needs of all three. Clearly, in the COVID-19 environment, the two organizations that need the most help, one are the small businesses and the other is the nonprofits that are busy serving the needs of the not so fortunate. So, we're doing our very best to try to mobilize people to help each other as best we can. So, I don't know what we can do to have an effect, an impact on some of the decisions that are made, but I think, and I hear about the barbershops. Aren't there ways that as a community we can not sidestep what the governor is saying, but say, hey, look, if you wear your masks and you stay 3 feet apart, we think it's reasonable to assume you can continue to do your business. I feel like maybe we're not being proactive enough to help put some of these people back to work. What do you think?
It's tough. I don't think well, first and foremost, I certainly don't have an answer, but trying to continue to balance and I do think overall, given the challenge, I think Governor Cooper has done a really, really good job of trying to allow for the economic activity to continue, which, I come from a very, very humble background, modest background. And I can tell you that my parents wouldn't have had nor do they still, the luxury of not working, and the risk of health would be way secondary to the economic risk of losing their house, for instance. And so I think first and foremost, anybody that has a government position like mine, charged with serving the public, has to really feel that. And as I had mentioned, I was able to feel that in a very real way through my conversations with Mayor Pro Tem France. And then the other side of it, certainly, I learned so much from Council Member Ya Lu, who, as people are aware, I think emigrated here 12 years ago. And certainly China has a lot of experience dealing with pandemics. And so she was a truly source of expertise, a subject matter expert, and really allowed us to position the town of Cary in a way much earlier than some of our other communities have been, as far as purchasing masks, giving them away. We closed the town of Cary offices before our peer communities and have resisted kind of trying to force everybody back into physical spaces before it's necessary. But certainly the promotion of economic activity in a safe way, this is going to, in some fashion, this is going to be with us for some time. Even if when there is a vaccine, it's not like everybody's going to get it the next day.
True.
And what will the efficacy of that vaccine be, right? And what are going to be the new patterns of interactions that will people shake hands ever again? I don't know. And for high touch, physical touch, or personal interaction entities, there's going to be at some level redefinition, and I don't know obviously what those are, but this will go on long enough. The event itself, which we're certainly in, and then the effects of the post-event, both economic and then health-wise, are going to test not only the town of Cary, but this nation for some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I was reflecting on how I was envisioning the plagues in the day of the kings and centuries ago in Japan. At some point, somebody decided that bowing made more sense than shaking hands. Somebody made the realization, or maybe the king established an edict and said, bow to me, don't put your hand out to me. So I think an elbow bump is perfectly acceptable greeting these days. But I appreciate your comment, and I know that Mayor Pro Tem Don France has his work cut out for him, both as a town council member and a full-time business owner. But I think he's fortunate, like I am, in the real estate business, they've declared us to be essential workers. I am not concerned about my employment. I am concerned, though, about some of the those that are not in a position to work, and what are we going to do for them when their businesses start failing if they haven't already. I think we need to be really thinking as a community what we're going to do to help them. So
We are, and I believe, I mean, lots of times people will judge a community by its nicest neighborhood. And so in that neighborhood, maybe it's downtown, that neighborhood may be, you know, very high-end housing. Well, I think for me personally, the better indicator is to judge a community by its poorest, or its most, you know, its most impoverished, the one that's struggling the most. Because we're only as strong as the most in need among us. So Cary will continue to grow in that area and making sure that we can keep that disparity as small as possible. And you know, economic insecurity is an awful thing to experience. And you know, many people on this call, if you will, certainly know what I'm talking about. Some people have been fortunate enough not to have that, but we keep that in front of our mind. I dropped off my dry cleaning yesterday, and it's in a shopping, and two of the small businesses next to it are now closed. And I just sat there looking at the paper in front of the windows, and they were open. They were here the entire 4 years I was in Cary. And so they'd gotten past that hump, that, you know, that first 18 months or whatever the number is now for a small business. And so I'm assuming that since one of them was a salon, that they're COVID related casualties. And I immediately started thinking about the people, you know, how have they adapted? Where are they at? And I don't want to ever lose that connection to be so, well, you know, this is what happens, you know, it's unfortunate. No one's going to hear me say it is what it is.
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit easier, I think, to stomach a developer going out of business because they overextended themselves, you know, out of greed, than it is, you know, for somebody in this kind of situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on a more positive note, there's a lot of excitement about the sports complex coming. Can you give us a quick update on how that's progressing?
Yeah, so the town continues to negotiate with the developer for the acquisition of the site. And once that's in hand, we'll start to look at the design of that. We also plan on, and it's still, this decision has not been made yet by the council formally, on making sure in some fashion, whether it be through a referendum or extensive surveying and focus groups, that this is in fact something that the community wants. Now, all the information that we have right now, which is significant, indicates that. And this recreation center would be not only a successor to Herb Young, which is in need of, you know, rejuvenation and the programs that we do there, but also a senior center. So it'd be recreation. It would be a multi-purpose family recreation center. The component that included the talks about an e-gaming facility or an auditorium arena, if you will. Well, you know, that's concentration of people, and fortunately we'll be able to see how that industry has changed, and maybe that component that was a pre-COVID you know, kind of business plan. The others I think will remain in place. I'm not saying that's done. I'm just saying is that fortunately we'll be able to have the benefit of studying that to see how society has adapted that overall. But we're very, very excited about the project. The county is funding about $30 million of it. They've put that on hold for obvious reasons for a year, which is fine, because you know, it makes sense. Our timeline could anticipate that anyway, because the land acquisition takes quite a bit of time. So this is about a 5-year project from now until construction would begin. And yeah, we have to balance the need to be realistic and grounded in some of the effects that we're seeing now. But if we think that Cary's going to have a future, and I think we all know that it will in some form, we have to continue to make that as positive as possible, and not sacrifice the future to ease pain in the present.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Neil, do we have any other questions that have come in?
Yeah, Sean, a few questions. Any update on the long-term plans for the old library site?
Yeah, so the old library site, so if, again, if this was, if COVID didn't happen, that RFQ and then RFP, the two-step process, request for qualifications, meaning that's more of an announcement to the development community that we're going to be looking for people to submit proposals. And then once you have that in the RFP process, then asking for proposals would, this is August, it would be underway now. Certainly the RFQ process would have been. And so we know that won't be occurring in 2020, given everything else. There is still amount of interest. We still get a lot of calls about that site, but we will push that into 2021 as it just makes sense to allow that industry to recover in any way that it needs to and focus on the projects that we have right now. And it makes, it's nice to have that site the way it is now. And I want to remind everybody that the town doesn't have like a very detailed vision of this is what we want that site to be. So that the potential for it to have both public and private spaces is very high. It's a much bigger site than I think people realized now they can see it. And so we will encourage the entire development community to put forward any ideas that they have, and then we'll be able to, evaluate those on the grand and public fashion, hopefully still next year. But nothing will happen in 2020.
Everybody is really enjoying the what you guys did with it as a park now, so the kudos to the town. Another question, going back to COVID, some towns like Apex, Portland, Oregon have done things to allow restaurants to expand outdoors and things like that to help them. Any conversations in the town about how to do some things to support other than the utilities that you talked about earlier?
Sure. We've had a few, but we haven't had a lot of requests for that, but we would embrace those. So, temporary closing of sections of either town property, either through easements or streets, whatever we could do in those areas. And so I want to make sure I put that message out for any small business that has an idea that would involve town property. You could expect us to be very open-minded to that. And if we were to say that we couldn't do it, you could expect from us it would be for very specific, measurable, and tangible reasons, because we're oriented towards yes in everything that we do. And sometimes we have to say no, but we try to avoid that at all costs, especially during a time like this. So we're more than happy to do those things.
Okay, great. And then one other question I saw was going back to your comments about the impact of COVID long-term. You talked about maybe population growth because of what, other areas that are less desirable moving here. Any other visions you have on how COVID would change the Cary landscape long-term?
Other than that, I think, well, one thing that's going to change the Cary landscape is, the last 10 years, we've gone from the youngest community in Wake County to the oldest. And so as median age, and the other dynamic that has occurred, we now import more jobs than we export on a daily basis, at least that pre-COVID numbers. I think there's certainly going to be a lot more people, not only due to aging, but into the jobs now many jobs being either fully remote well into the future. I know several people that their employers have said, you're going to be working from home forever now, which means you have more citizens at home. Cary starts to take on more of that dynamic of a retirement community, if you will. Mm-hmm. And how you manage, now I'm not saying it is a retirement community, but if it's aging, there's just going to be more and more people at home during daytime hours, which means the more you're home, the more time you have to observe things. So service calls for service have gone like this during COVID because everybody's at home. So luckily we launched 311 in January, but our call volume right away occurred something that we had modeled more for like 5 years from now. So I think that all the indications, the data would indicate that our citizens are going to become increasingly more hands-on because they have more time, or they're able to visibly kind of capture those things, which frankly makes it challenging, but it only helps us get better. It really only helps us get better. And so I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to navigate, and so looking forward to that challenge.
I'm sure. Well, that's all the time we have for questions today. And I want to take another moment just to thank you and your entire team for all that you do, especially for you taking the time this morning, for your tech support team to be available to make sure we can get you online this morning. And I wanted to throw out one thank you, special thank you on behalf of the Heart of Cary Association. We're going to offer you a $100 gift certificate to give to the employee of your choice. So we don't want any employees to think that you're getting any special treatment for being here. So yeah, you can do it any way you want. You can either recognize the employee of the month for the month of August, or you can just select someone that you think has earned it. But we'll get that gift certificate over to your office and hope that it goes to someone who deserves it, and I'm sure it will.
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I want to encourage anyone that had a question that they can email me. So just because they couldn't get it in, might give me some time, may take a couple of days, if I get a lot. And we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible in a thorough fashion. I found this to be incredibly professional, incredibly well done. The question is great. I'm thoroughly impressed and very appreciative. And that $100 gift certificate is a really kind gesture. And we're going to give it to Kaylin.
Okay, wonderful.
The tech support was here at 7 a.m. when I walked in, way before me, making sure that everything went well. And we appreciate Kaylin and Susan here helping me make sure that I'm in a position to do my best. So
I will piggyback on that nomination for sure. Thank you, Kaylin. Really appreciate it. All right. This has been the Heart of Cary Association. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you to all of our board members, our engaged members. I encourage you to join a committee if you're not on one. Look forward to our invitation for September's upcoming meeting, and please put on your calendar August 27th. An invitation is forthcoming about our next event regarding addressing social injustice. Again, Scott Corbin, wishing you a great day. Thank you very much.